The Nigeria Meteorological Agency and Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency have both predicted that the country will experience flooding in almost all the states in the country. The agencies have therefore asked citizens who are living along riverbanks, floodplain areas, as well as people living on the lowland to relocate. Our next report highlights some of the impacts of flooding in the country.
In its 2018 seasonal rainfall prediction, the Nigeria Meteorological Agency had warned that much water would pour on the surface of the earth between the last week of July and the end of August, unless adequate provision is made to accommodate the amount of water that's running on the surface. Just this week, the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency also came out with a red alert, warning residents of some states, particularly in the south-south, southeast and north-central regions, to brace for more incidents of river flooding. According to the agency, both the Kenji and Jeba dams are already spilling water downstream, while the level of water in Lokoja, the Kogi state capital, has already exceeded the corresponding value in 2012. In the face of the latest development, the prediction of normal seasonal rain this year appears to be stretching beyond the normal.
Earlier than normal onset, normal cessation and normal rainfall are found in many parts of the country. Also, dry spells during the rainy season may be more frequent and severe in some parts, while the little dry season in some parts of the south are expected to be pronounced.
States such as Ogun, Kaduna, Edo, Anambra, Kano, Katsina and Bauchi have all had their share of the ravaging effects of flooding following heavy rains. The result so far has indeed been devastating. While some have been lucky, others have horrific tales to tell. NIMET's call for caution may have been heeded by just a few, and those who did not have had to struggle with the wrath of nature as their houses are either swept away or they are forced to seek shelter elsewhere until the water subsides. The devastation caused by the 2012 flooding in many parts of the country remains fresh in the minds of many Nigerians, especially those affected. But with the latest alert by the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, the flooding this year may be more scary. Perhaps this will be a better time for everyone on the floodplains to prepare for the worst.
And the question is, in a battle with nature, who wins? Well, taking a look further at the flooding predictions and how to deal with the fallout, I'm now being joined by Professor of Climatology from the University of Lagos, Professor Emmanuel Oladipo. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Would you say that the predictions by NIMET and the Hydrological Services Agency for this year's rainfall is perhaps anything out of the ordinary?
Not really. Thank you very much again for being here. We need to commend government for trying to make sure that at least we have better information than we used to have before. NIMET and the Hydrological Services, the capacity they have now can only give what I call global scale. They are not in position to still be able to tell us what we call real-time forecasting, in which we'll be able to know the exact space and the timing of the floods. So that is what is still lacking. I think we need to really strengthen the capacities of those two agencies to be able to do what we call real-time forecasting, whereby we'll be able to at least have a good knowledge a day or two before floods ravage places.
So you think it's a bit ambiguous?
It's still general. That's what because they use methods that are called global. They are based on certain extrapolations from global analysis.
So compared to what we saw in 2012,
yes,
the flooding there, what can we say about the kind that we're being warned now?
Now, the 2012 flood was a bit compounded by the massive amount of water that came from the Cameroon side and rushed into the Benue Valley. And the valley couldn't contain it because we didn't we were not proactive enough as a nation to have a dam, which is now under construction, which will have been there to absorb and retain some of the water coming from the Cameroonian side, without allowing it to go all the way down to the Benue Valley. So the valley, the 2012 was more of a riverine aspect, which was able to go all the way along the Benue to Lokoja, even all the way to Bayelsa. But this one we are witnessing actually large-scale floods, more or less perpetrated by heavy, intense rainfall conditions that we should normally expect, particularly in the northern part of Nigeria, in the month of August. Nearly 60% of the rainfall of northern Nigeria occur in the month of August. So definitely one will expect more of the flooding in the northern part and in the southern part. In July, it should be the southern part. So we have to know all those things, but more importantly, to be able to have the methodology that will give us better prediction and better forecasting of peculiar areas that are likely to be affected.
Also, I know many people are watching this program at this point, and we always get those warnings every now and again, especially people to move, people who are living in low land areas and the floodplain areas. I mean, what should we do to end this cycle? Because they move for the moment, and then when dry season comes, they're back there again.
Yeah. Now, in floods normally are very difficult to manage. We have to understand one thing. In terms of agriculture, floodplains are the most fertile. And it's because this flood we are complaining about are the ones that bring very fine silt materials and deposit them in areas where they flood. And once the water goes, it becomes very fertile agricultural land that you don't even need much fertilizer to. So people will definitely go there. In the case of Nigeria, apart from that, the second major problem we have in terms of the urban flows, that what happened in Kaduna, Katsina, and other places, is because we went through a period of fairly minimal rainfall, not completely dry, which did not make most of these rivers to really swell to the level they normally swell to in the 60s and 50s. And people started encroaching on these floodplains in Kaduna and other areas to build houses. So we suffer the fact that our urban planners were not able to really dissuade people from building on those areas. So those ones, there's hardly anything they can do. Because most of the places along the floodplains where these houses are really built on the average, with all sense of modesty, by people that are not very rich, and they could not afford to really do the type of rafting and the type of structures required that can allow them to cope with flood. So with this level of poverty, how do you move them? So government has to find a way by which they have to develop a strategic approach in which, okay, let's map out all these floodplains in the urban areas and see what we can do to relocate the people and provide alternative housings for them. And
just like I asked, before we started the conversation, in a battle with nature, who wins?
Nature, of course. We may subdue nature for a while, but after some time, nature will fight back. And that's what we have to accept. All the bridges you saw in the northern part that are collapsing is because at one time or the other, a lot of silting are taking place, most of these things. So, and when contractors are given this to do, they don't really take into account what the previous flood level, what the previous floodplain was. So your bridge should really stretch more than what they normally do. And by the time the rainfall returns to normal, the bridges will definitely be washed away.
Thank you so much. More work for the government. University of Lagos Professor Emmanuel Oladipo for coming on the News at 10.
Thank you.
We'll take you now to politics, where the People's Democratic Party, PDP, has faulted the president over his comments on Nigerians making an attempt to enter Europe illegally through the desert and the Mediterranean. While hosting the German Chancellor Angela Merkel in Abuja, President Muhammadu Buhari had said Any Nigerian who attempts to defy the desert and the Mediterranean is doing so at their own risk, as he does not support anything illegal. But in a statement by its National Publicity Secretary, Mr. Kola Ologbodiyan, the PDP challenged the president to solve the problem that prompted citizens of the country to embark on such perilous journey in search of greener pastures. The statement reads in part, quote, "While the PDP does not in any way support illegal migrations, our party hopes that such does not warrant incendiary statements against our citizens by no less a person than the president, who should be seeking for ways to solve the problem," end of quote. The PDP condemns the attacks on Nigerians living abroad, including those with legitimate documents and engaged in lawful activities, adding that it is the duty of the elected leader of government to pursue the fundamental human rights of citizens. Elsewhere, vote selling and buying appears to have characterized recent elections in Nigeria, and political actors are raising concern about the possible threat this might pose to the 2019 general elections. A presidential aspirant of the Alliance for New Nigeria, Mr. Pt.2, is taking the campaign against the practice to young people. Speaking at a conference in Abuja, he appealed to youths to allow values and their vision for a new Nigeria inform their choice candidate come 2019.
Your vote is the right to the environment that will produce your dreams for you. So if you don't have your PVC, you will most likely get the government you deserve, because you will not have the power to choose. So guys, I'm not here to tell you to vote for me. I'm not sure I will ever tell anybody to vote for me. I'm not sure. Because I am always going to tell you to vote for the country of your dreams. I would always tell you to vote for the values that you would want to live in and you want your dreams to live in. And I would like to always say to you, vote for the pathway that will deliver to you that enabling environment. Vote for the Nigeria you want. Vote for the values you want in that Nigeria.
And in Kano, a 2-year action plan on good governance has been launched in the state, northwest Nigeria, with a steering committee of open government partnership. The committee will partner with all relevant agencies to ensure transparency in governance across the state from 2018 to 2020. Our correspondent Idris Jibrin reports.
Transparency, empower citizens, fight corruption.
Good governance, transparency and accountability are the driving force behind the establishment of the Steering Committee on Open Government Partnership.
Today is the day that will showcase the commitment of Kano State Government. And
members are mandated to ensure that all Kano indigents, home and abroad, are properly informed about the activities of the state governments, while the action plan focuses on implementation.
We made it categorically clear that our administration would be up and doing in making sure that governance at all levels in the state becomes transparent, accountable, and wide open. This is in tandem with the federal government policies under President Muhammadu Buhari.
The committee, which has the backing of the federal government, British High Commission and the United States Embassy to Nigeria, will begin its assignments immediately.
OGP is an international multi-stakeholder initiative focused on improving transparency, accountability, citizen participation, and government responsiveness to citizens through technology and innovation.
We have an action plan that have two-year lifespan now, from 2019 to 2020. So we'll make sure that by the special grace of Allah, we'll make sure that we ensure the implementation of the OGP action plan, which will serve as a constitution or rather a guiding principle of OGP in Kano State.
Participants believe that Kano State government has been consistent in updating the public regarding the activities of government, but much more is required to achieve the desired results.
I'm happy with the level of even cooperation that is existing between the civil society organization and, of course, the state government.
If the government is not actually serious in this campaign against corruption and transparency, we want to expose itself to the general public.
The aim is to ensure accountability to the people and proper dissemination of information. Idris Jibrin, Channels Television News.